10 to 16. A reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. An evil man seeketh only rebellion. Therefore a cruel messenger shall be sent against him. Let a bear robbed of her whelps meet a man, rather than a fool in his folly. Whoso rewardeth evil for good, evil shall not depart from his house. The beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water. Therefore leave off contention before it be meddled with. He that justifieth the wicked, and he that condemneth the just, even they both are abomination to the Lord. Wherefore is there a price in the hand of a fool to get wisdom, seeing he hath no heart to it? You may be seated.
The date was October 29th, 2025. It's just a little more than 2 weeks ago. Our girls were away for the evening, so Martha and I were home alone. It was just after 9 p.m. when a car pulled into our driveway. And shortly thereafter, our doorbell rang. We opened it to find 5 people on our front porch. 5 smiling youth from our church who came to drop off a gift and to express appreciation to their pastors. Included in the gift was this bag of gummy bears. And yes, there are some in there. I protected them carefully, so I had some left for today. So as we sat in our family room, enjoying conversation and gummy bears, the subject turned to sermons. And one of the smiling youth, gummy bears in hand, requested that I preach about bears. Now, every once in a while, Martha will ask me, what should I make for supper? And occasionally I might have a suggestion, and sometimes she responds, oh, I didn't think about that. That's a good idea. Well, when the suggestion was given that I preach about bears, I thought a little bit, and I thought, I never thought about that, but that's a good idea. So that's what you get this morning, thanks to the group of 5 smiling young people that brightened our evening a couple weeks ago. So thanks for stopping by. We enjoyed your visit, and thanks for the suggestion. I appreciate that as well. I've encountered quite a few bears in the wild from time to time, but only once in my life do I really remember ever being scared by a bear. Our family was away on vacation. I was quite young at the time. And I don't remember exactly where it was, but we were visiting a waterfall somewhere in the mountains. And this was a kind of a touristy area. There was a gift shop and so forth, the parking lot there, and then a trail off to the waterfall. And I was young enough that I remember being carried on my brother's shoulders. He was carrying me around there in this area. And as he was carrying me around, he said, close your eyes. So that's what I did. And he walked around a bit more. And after a few moments, he said, now open your eyes. And a few inches in front of my face was a mounted bear, standing erect on its hind legs, arms outspread, with its teeth bared. I think that's the only time I was really frightened by a bear. Of course, the bear was not alive, and the initial surprise soon turned into amusement. So I'll start the message this morning by giving you a few facts, a little bit of information on bears, and then go into some application on that. In North America, there are 3 types of bears: black bears, and then the grizzly or the brown bear, which are basically the same, and the polar bear. Now, someone has said, and perhaps you've heard the quote, telling you how to react if you meet each of these bears. If it's black, fight back. In other words, a black bear usually is not very aggressive, and if you stand your ground and make some noise, it'll usually leave. So if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. A grizzly bear or a brown bear, you're not going to scare off. And if it perceives you as a threat, you're going to be the loser. So the best thing is to play dead and make sure you do not appear to be a threat. So if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. If it's white, say goodnight. It's all over. Even lying down isn't going to protect you. Now, that may not be true in every case, but it's an interesting quote. So I'd like to look at these three types of bears. First of all, looking at the black bear. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I had the opportunity to celebrate our anniversary in the Smokies, and one of the things we enjoyed, among many other things, was watching bears. This chubby chap was one of about 12 that we saw while we were there. A black bear will commonly reach 200 to 300 pounds and can get much heavier. The largest black bear killed in Pennsylvania a number of years back had an estimated live weight of over 850 pounds. That was a big black bear. Black bears are typically not very dangerous unless they become too accustomed to people. Then they may get dangerous, but in a wild setting, they will usually avoid contact if they can. Quite a few years ago, before Bald Eagle Boys Camp was operating, one of my friends and I spent a week there on doing some work projects for them. And this was right at the beginning. They had no buildings there yet. In fact, we were helping to build the road up the mountain, up to the top, putting in some culverts and some things there. There were no buildings there, so we stayed in a tent along the backside of the property along the Scutac Creek. Some of you know where that is. One night, as we were in our tent, we heard a clatter outside the tent. Some things rattling. And the first thought that came to my mind, we were right along a creek, is, oh, probably a raccoon is ambling by and digging through our trash or something, and I hit in the side of our tent, made some noise, everything got quiet. I was ready to go back to sleep. My friend was not. He said, I want to know what's out there. So he got a flashlight, and he zipped open the tent, turned it around a little bit. He said, well, our ice chest is upside down on the ground. Oh, I see some eyes back there. They're coming back. I can't see what it is, but they're too far apart for a raccoon. And it got a little bit closer. He said, it's a bear. And that bear hung around for a little while, and we were talking to it. We informed him that he has permission to leave. He did not take that privilege for a little bit. So we got out of the tent, lit our lantern, and at that point, he finally left. But at no point did he show any aggression or any reason for alarm, and that's typical for black bears. A grizzly bear or a brown bear is much larger and much more aggressive. A grizzly or a coastal brown bear can exceed 1,500 pounds and reach 9.5 feet tall, standing on their hind legs. That would make Ira appear pretty short and Amos appear pretty small when you compare him to a bear of this size. Their claws on their front feet can be 5 inches long. So you look at a man's fingers and add about another half of a finger length to that. Their claws are intimidating. And their feet can be about as big as a man's hands, 2 of them together. So imagine the damage that these feet and claws can do to anything, including your face or your body. Their mouths are filled with 42 teeth, and they can bite with a force of over 900 pounds per square inch. So there's probably nothing on your body that's going to stop the force of those teeth. These bears fear no other animals or people. If you meet one on the trail, they're just as likely to rip you to shreds as they are to leave you alone. And don't try to outrun them. They can run up to 35 miles per hour. No human has ever run that fast even with a bear right behind him. If you try to run away from them, they'll be more than happy to play tag with you, and they will win. The third kind of bear is the polar bear. Now, I've encountered quite a few black bears and a few grizzly bears in the wild, but I never encountered a polar bear in the wild. I've wished for the opportunity, but have not had it at this point. They are just as big as a brown bear and perhaps even more aggressive than a brown bear. Now, in our passage this morning, we read about a bear. What kind of bear was this referring to? What kind of bears were people in the Bible times familiar with? Well, probably not a polar bear. The three bears I described are North American bears. What kind of bears live in the Middle East? The most common bear in that area is the Eurasian brown bear. Most similar in size to our grizzly bear. It's bigger and more aggressive than a black bear, although perhaps not quite as aggressive as a grizzly bear. I've encountered these bears on several occasions in Romania in the Carpathian Mountains when I was hiking. And I've also heard stories of people who encountered them. There was one man that we worked with at Christian Aid Ministries. He received some aid through the mission. He lived in a very mountainous area, high in the mountains, fairly remote area. And he had in that area a log barn, very similar to this one, in which he kept a cow and a few sheep. Now, for this family, these animals were not a convenience or a luxury. They were his livelihood. His family depended on them, depended heavily on them. And to lose these animals would have been pretty devastating. And when a bear started coming around, trying to get into his barn, this man was rightly concerned, and he was telling us about that. How could he protect his animals and his family from the results of this bear? He didn't have a gun. Most Romanians in that area did not have. So he had to resort to something else. He resorted to what he had, a chainsaw. When the bear came back, he fired up the saw and went running after the bear. I guess he figured he would fight the bear on its own terms with a loud roar and sharp teeth. And at any rate, the bear must have assumed that any creature that could roar like that must be pretty dangerous, and it decided to leave. But the man was still concerned that it might come back again. And I think this is the type of bear that the people in the Bible times were familiar with. Like I indicated earlier, they're somewhat comparable to our grizzly bear. And that's the kind of bear I want you to keep in your mind as we continue in our message today. So why do I give you all this information about bears? It's not only because I enjoy watching or seeing bears, and it's not just to entertain you or to scare you, and it's not only because of the request of the youth who visited us a couple weeks ago. I'm talking about bears because the Bible talks about bears. The Bible talks about bears on a number of occasions. And it doesn't only mention bears in stories, although it does that a number of times. I won't take time to list them. You can recall some of those. But it also uses bears as an example and as an illustration to make a point. I think the Bible writer of Proverbs here wanted us to take what we know about bears and apply that to our lives so that we can be better prepared to live as we should. So our text verse was in the passage that Norman read. Let a bear robbed of her whelps meet a man rather than a fool in his folly. And the title, Scarier Than an Angry Bear. So that brings us to the question, which would you rather meet? One of those bears with long claws and big paws that has no fear of you, or a foolish man doing foolish things? And just to remind you, this bear, a bear is dangerous, but this is not only a bear, this is a bear that has been robbed. You take something away from an animal, it might get upset. You try to take a bone away from a dog, that dog might be upset. You take something from a bear, that bear is going to be upset. Well, this bear wasn't just robbed, she was robbed of her cubs. This bear is in protective mode. She's not going to stop for anything as long as she's alive. Now, isn't this verse just a bit extreme? Would it actually be better to meet a bear in this mood than a fool in his folly? Which would you rather choose? Our inclination would be to choose the fool. Well, I'll meet up with a fool rather than a bear. Yeah, there might be a few outdoorsmen among us here that say, oh, bring on the bear. I'd be happy to take care of that. But if that's your thoughts, you're probably missing the point. Put yourself in the setting in which this verse was written. You did not have a high-powered rifle. You may have been out working in the fields or the forest, or perhaps traveling, and suddenly, unexpectedly, you come face to face with this bear. You have no weapons. Would you really say, bring on the bear? Probably not. Remember what this bear is capable of. It can grab your whole face between its jaws, crush your bones as if they're pretzels, and turn your flesh into spaghetti with his tremendous claws. Is it really better to meet a bear than a fool in his folly? Okay, so maybe this sermon has a bad title. Maybe the bear is scarier. But do you believe what the Bible says, that the bear is the better option? Perhaps a better title would be more dangerous than an angry bear. We might be scared of the bear, but there is something that is more dangerous. Why is the fool so dangerous? Why? I would like to get to that. But first, let's look at the question, what is a fool? I'd like to answer that question from the Bible. The description of foolishness. What is a fool? Well, a fool can be any one of a number of things. You don't need to meet all of these in order to be a fool. A fool can be any one of these things. And I'm going to be referring to the book of Proverbs quite a bit. The book of Proverbs has over 70 verses that mention fools and foolishness. And in the chapter that we read from this morning, there are 8 references in that chapter alone. And I'll be referring to some other verses as well, but a lot of them are from Proverbs. So what is a fool? A fool is a person who denies there is a God. Psalm 14:1 says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Now, probably most of us do not associate very closely with people who deny the existence of God. But they are around, and we do encounter them. I have some pretty close connections with people who would deny the existence of God. I'd really like to know sometimes if that's what they really believe in their heart, but that is what they express with their mouth. A person who denies there is a God is a fool. The next point might be a little more common. A person who despises wisdom and instruction. And I'm going to list quite a few verses here. Proverbs 1:7 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And this is somewhat related to the first point. You don't actually need to deny there is a God, but if you deny the words and the wisdom of God, that puts you into this category. Or a person who denies and rejects the wisdom of God is a fool, according to this verse. Proverbs verse 12, verse 15. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. So the foolish person despises wisdom and instruction because he thinks he knows better. He is right in his own eyes. He thinks he knows what is best. or he is determined to go his own way, even if it is not best. So a person who despises wisdom and instruction, this is what this verse is talking about. Proverbs 28:26, he that trusteth in his own heart is a fool. You're despising the wisdom of God. Proverbs 23, verse 9, speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of thy words. A fool is someone who just simply rejects simple wisdom. This point should get our attention. Are there biblical instructions that you despise or that you ignore, that you would rather not pay attention to? And are there biblical instructions that the people that you associate with ignore? Your friends, your associates, who will simply ignore something that the Bible teaches. That is a dangerous relationship. If you get too close to that person emotionally, they're going to get you. More dangerous than a bear. So a description of foolishness can be someone who denies there is a God. It can be someone who despises the wisdom and instruction of God. It can also be a person who makes a mockery of sin. Proverbs 14, verse 9 says, fools make a mock at sin, but among the righteous there is favor. This includes people who deny the seriousness of sin. They accept sin. It's not so serious. It's not so bad. They mock it. They might laugh at an immoral joke. That's making a mockery of sin. That's foolishness. It may be a person who gossips just a little. That's making a mockery of sin. Or give in to gluttony just a little. Or maybe they gamble just a little. Maybe it's sports betting. That's making a mockery of sin. Or disrespecting or disobeying authority just a little. Or coveting just a little. And the list goes on. You may think of many other things. This is making a mockery of sin, and this is foolishness. And if you know people who are doing this, you need to be careful how attached you become to that person. What is a fool? It is a person who speaks evil of others. Proverbs 10, verse 18, he that hideth hatred with lying lips, and he that uttereth a slander is a fool. This verse refers to running down someone's reputation by speaking negatively about them. And maybe the things you're saying aren't even true. This verse talks about somebody who has hatred towards somebody, and rather than just saying, I hate that person, he will come up with evil things to say about that person. He will tell lies against them. He hides his hatred with lying lips or utters slander. Maybe the things that he's saying are true, but not necessary to be spoken about. And if what you're saying is not helpful, it may be better left unsaid. So let us be careful about the things we say about others. And let us be careful about the things we listen to other people saying about others. Because if we spend time with people, associating with people who have a habit of saying slanderous things about others, we need to be careful. That's dangerous. Well, there are more descriptions of a fool. A person who has a closed mind and an open mouth. Proverbs talks quite a bit about this, a number of verses. Proverbs 18:2, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. That's the ESV. I think it's a little bit clearer in that. His pleasure is just simply saying what he wants to say. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. He just wants to express himself. Proverbs 29:11, a fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. The fool's goal is to express himself rather than to express the truth. And that may not always be the same, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care to distinguish between the two. He will give his opinions higher status than the truth. Proverbs 10:19, in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. A fool, may be a person who has a closed mind and an open mouth. And another verse in Proverbs 17:28, even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise. He that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. Another way of saying this verse, which you may have heard people say, is that it's better to keep your mouth shut and appear to be a fool than it is to open it and remove all doubt. Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise. He opens his mouth, he may remove all doubt. One more characteristic I'd like to look at here. A person who lacks the ability or the desire to distinguish values and respond appropriately. A person who lacks the wherewithal to make good choices. He is destitute of wisdom. He walks in foolishness. He just keeps returning back to his foolish ways over and over. In the Bible, foolishness generally pertains more to moral character than what it does to intellectual IQ. A person might be educated, he might be intelligent, but if he keeps returning to his foolishness, he is not wise. And what the writer of Proverbs is saying here, if you see a person who just makes the same foolish mistakes, does the same foolish activities over and over again, you need to be careful of that person. He's out to get you. So that is the description of foolishness. Let's move on and look at the danger of foolishness. So I think we agreed that a foolish person may not be scarier than a bear, but he is more dangerous than a bear, even if we might not be scared of him. Why is a fool more dangerous than a bear? Well, first of all, a fool is not as easily recognizable as a bear. If you see an angry bear running towards you, you know what it is. You recognize the danger, and you do whatever you can to avoid that confrontation. If you have the option, you won't mess with him. But a fool might be harder to recognize. He may be somebody that you talk to every day. You might do business with him, or work with him, or study with him, and you might be so accustomed to his actions that you barely think about them. The Bible talks about wolves who come in sheep's clothing, and a fool may also come in sheep's clothing. He may not look like an angry bear, but he is just as dangerous. So the fact that you may not initially recognize him for who he is makes him especially dangerous. We need to be aware of that. Why is a fool dangerous? More dangerous than a bear. Number one, he's not as easily recognizable. Number two, a bear may attack, but a fool entices. There's a big difference. You can be sure that a bear robbed of her cubs is in the attack mode. And when a bear is in the attack mode, there's no doubt what it's up to. It's a full-on charge. No sneakiness, no prowling, no hiding, no lurking in the shadows. It doesn't care how much noise it makes or how big it looks. In fact, the noisier and the bigger, the better. But foolishness is not that way. Foolishness will come sneaking in, trying to hide its identity, and trying to look appealing, enticing, looking like something good. Proverbs 1 talks a lot about the enticement of foolishness, and not only chapter 1, other chapters as well. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. They say, cast in thy lot among us. They make it look very enticing, make it sound good. But what they don't say is that it leads to death. Proverbs 5 says, the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil, very enticing. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps take hold on hell. A fool in his folly is dangerous because it may look enticing, but you may not see initially where that's going to lead you. Another reason why a fool is so dangerous is that if you spend time with a fool, you tend to become like the fool. You tend to become foolish yourself. Now, if you spend time with a bear, you're not likely to become like the bear. Some time back, I talked to a man who spent his life training bears. He worked with bears pretty much on a daily basis. And he was telling about some of his experiences. But to me, that man did not look at all like a bear. He did not become like that bear. He wasn't covered with long black hair with large teeth. He still looked the same. You don't become like a bear by spending time with a bear. But you spend time with a fool, you begin to become like that fool. Proverbs 13:20. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. It doesn't say just the foolish person will be destroyed, but a companion of fools. And that's because you will become like him. Keeping company with a fool is dangerous business. Why is foolishness so dangerous? Foolishness becomes addictive. Now, I've read a number of stories about bear attacks, and I could have told you some stories here. I chose not to do that. Mostly they're quite gory. But I never heard of a bear attack victim say, I think I'll go and see if I can get mauled by another bear. It just gives me such a rush of adrenaline. They don't do that. Or I don't hear them say, you know what, I made the news. I got to spend time in the hospital. I had a ride in an ambulance. I kind of enjoyed all that attention. I think I'll go see if I can do it again. Rather, what you hear them say is how they're going to avoid allowing it to happen again. But foolishness becomes addictive. That's why it's more dangerous than the bear. You allow it in your presence and you become comfortable with it. You experiment with it and you find yourself drawn into it. And the more you're drawn into it, the harder it is to resist it. It's like the vortex of a funnel. You just get pulled closer and closer into the center. The addictive nature of foolishness is dangerous. It's better to meet a bear. It's not addictive. And the fifth reason, or the fifth danger of foolishness, a bear might kill the body, but a fool may destroy your soul. Do you see why it's better to meet an angry bear than a fool in his folly? A bear, the worst thing he can do is injure you, or maybe kill your physical body, and maybe give you a few nightmares for the weeks to follow. But a bear will not attack your mind. He will not give you unbiblical philosophy that he will convince you to follow. You will not learn to love what it loves and hate what it hates. He will not attack your soul and your spiritual values. All he can do is mess with your body. But a fool can do much worse. He will attack your spiritual life. Jesus' words in Matthew 10 apply here. He says, fear not them which kill the body. And in this case, we could say, don't fear the bears. The worst they can do is kill your body. But he says, rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. And the context of this passage is that we need to fear God. God is the one who has the final word on the fool and his foolishness. And we need to be fearful of those fools and of the God who deals with them. Moving on, we could look at the destruction brought by foolishness. I'll be brief on this. I'll just mention foolishness is not a detour. It's a dead-end street. Proverbs 5, her feet go down to death. Her steps take hold on hell. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. Just like an angry bear, if not stopped, will kill you. So foolishness, if left to complete its work, will lead to spiritual death. That's the destruction brought by foolishness. Okay, let's go on to our concluding point here. Our defense against foolishness. So, what is my point in this message? Why all this talk about bears and foolishness? There'd certainly be more pleasant things to talk about than foolishness. But foolishness is dangerous and it can lead to destruction. And this verse, let a bear robbed of her whelps meet a man rather than a fool in his folly. This verse is a warning. I'd like to give you two takeaways from this verse, two reasons why I believe this verse was written, and two ways that God wants us to respond to foolishness. This is our defense against foolishness. Number one, avoid the presence of foolishness. Simply don't spend time in the company of fools. If you spend your time with fools, this verse is referring to you. So now think about who you associate with. I would just insert a comment here. When we think about spending time with fools, it's very easy for us to look around at everyone else around us, to assume that, I'm preaching just to the youth. They need to be concerned about peer pressure, or to the young marrieds, or maybe the young people think, well, he's probably preaching to the older people that should have their act together by now. They should be able to avoid foolish influences. But I want to encourage each one of us to look at ourselves this morning in whatever stage of life we're in. This is for me and for you individually. Who do you enjoy being with? Who do you connect with on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or wherever it is? What characteristics and influences do they have? Do you find their influence to be enticing and addictive? We need to think about that. And here again, there's a number of verses. Proverbs 13:20, he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Be careful who you associate with. 1 Corinthians 15, be not deceived. Evil communications, evil relationships corrupt good manners. Be careful who you connect with. 1 Timothy 6:3-5. It's talking about people who are caught up in foolishness, proud, knowing nothing. From such withdraw thyself. That is a challenge. And we had a similar verse in our Sunday school lesson this morning. Withdraw yourselves from this kind of people. 2 Timothy 3:5 is another verse similar to that, as well as Proverbs 14, verse 7. These all encourage us to flee from the presence of a fool. So if you come face to face with a grizzly bear, don't run. You'll be the loser. If you come face to face with foolishness, run. Get out of there as quick as you can. Do not get sucked into the vortex of foolishness. So our defense against foolishness is to have nothing to do with it. Get out of there. Be away from it. Avoid the presence of foolishness. I think that's the primary point of this verse. And perhaps the secondary point is to avoid the practice of foolishness. We talked about not spending time in the company of fools, but the secondary message is don't be a fool. Don't be a fool yourself. Don't provide others with the companionship of foolishness. Don't provide the company of fools to others. Don't be a fool. There was a time when I was in school that I misbehaved. Actually, there was more than one time, I'm sure. But on this particular occasion, I don't remember what I did. It doesn't really matter. But whatever it was, the teacher felt that he needed to take some action. And he gave me a list of Bible references that he asked me to copy onto a paper, copy these Bible verses. So he had a book written there, and with a whole list of chapters and verses from that book. So I copied one verse from Proverbs, and another, and another. I don't remember how many. And every one of these verses mentioned a fool or foolishness. I was irritated. To me, it was pretty obvious what this teacher thought of me, and he wasn't very tactful about it. I wasn't very impressed. And it wasn't until I had the last verse copied that I looked back at my assignment and realized it wasn't the book of Proverbs I was supposed to be writing from. It was the book of Romans. The teacher never once mentioned foolishness, but God knew that's what I needed. And that was the verses that I wrote down. I think God knew what I needed that day. I needed a reminder that I was acting foolishly, and I did need to change. As you consider your life and the influence, maybe the enticements you have on those around you, are you more dangerous than an angry bear? What are your aspirations in life? Look back over the list of descriptions that I gave you earlier. Look at them individually, one by one. Do any one of these apply to me? And if so, take it personally. I'd like to close with a message of hope. The Bible indicates that pigs will always be pigs. You scrub a pig, let it go, it'll go right back to the mud. A dog will always be a dog. A dog is sick and vomits up what's in its stomach, it'll go right back to it and eat it up again. Leopards will always be leopards. A leopard cannot change its spots, the Bible says. And the Bible indicates that to some extent, a fool will be a fool. But there is hope for a fool. Sorry, I already had that slide up. A message of hope. Psalm 107, 17 to 19. Fools, because of their transgression and because of their iniquities, are afflicted. Then they cry unto the Lord in their trouble, and he saveth them out of their distresses. I feel like this was maybe not a very positive subject this morning, but I think it is a subject we need to take seriously. Let God examine your life and let him save you out of your distresses. God specializes in turning bears into lambs, and that's what he can do for you as well. Let's kneel for prayer. Lord, this morning I thank you for the many illustrations in your word that are so practical and so picturesque, things that we can imagine and things that we can learn from. And I pray that we would read your Bible with an open mind to learn what you have for us in your word. Lord, I just pray that we would examine ourselves this morning and examine our associations and examine our lives and allow you to work in us and perform what you want in our lives for your honor and glory. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Well, I'm thankful this morning to the Lord for something that I don't think I ever thanked him for before, and that's that Proverbs 17:12 is in the Bible. I thank the Lord for the truth of Proverbs 17:12, and I thank Nate for explaining that and preaching that so well. The danger